Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome to 420 Live with Jeff Kravitz. I'm your host. I'm Jeff Kravitz. And it is the 8th of May. It is Friday. We are about 2 months into our pandemic. Everybody should be safe. You're either dead or you're not. I'm sure you figured it out at this point, whether you're going to survive this pandemic or not. I think, I hope, I'm praying that we are done with the and we're going to get back to normal. So as you can see today, I am festively dressed. My friends from Astor's Chocolate sent me a new wardrobe, and I wanted to break it out. The chocolate's on the inside, the tie-dye's on the outside. It's just delicious stuff. I love the family. I love their product. We go back a long way. Great music fans. We're all music fans here. Everybody that comes in, that tunes in, loves music. And we've been touching on different eras and hitting up everything, all our favorite bands. And this is my first week with the Osiris Media Network, and I'm happy to be a part of them. And we've kicked up the shows a little bit this week. We started with Tom, we talked Fish, we talked Portugal the Man, and today we're going to go into a totally different territory. One of the bands that influenced all the bands out there. Everybody has been influenced by the Talking Heads. And, for me, I was a 16, 17-year-old going to my friend's house to smoke some bud and listen to music. And we would go through his brother's record collection. His brothers had this black record with 4 or 5 green words on it. It said, Talking Heads, Fear of Music. And I was like, that is the weirdest album cover I've ever seen. Let's see what it sounds like. And I put it on. And I was right. It was some of the weirdest music I ever heard. Paper, Air, Mind, Heaven, lots of one-word songs that, seemed very simple and simple beats, but really cool. And it got to me, and the music started to get in my head, and I started to like it. And I was like, wow, this is completely different than anything I'd ever heard before. Steeped in the history of the Velvet Underground and all those 60s bands that were kind of artsy and different and inspired. So I got off on it, and it was great. And I remember I went through my catalog, and on April 30th, 1982, I got in the car and drove up to the Mann Music Center to see the Talking Heads. And I snuck in a Walkman, a tiny little Walkman with a condenser microphone built in my back pocket, and my camera. And I took a couple pictures, which are still up on Film Magic. I put one up on my Instagram for you guys to see from 82. I believe that would be Remain in Light, because I don't remember the big suit. I just remember David coming out with the boombox and putting it on stage by himself. And next thing you know, he's surrounded by a dozen guys, and they just rocked it all. And, everybody was watching Radiohead from Bonnaroo yesterday and was like, this is the greatest concert I've ever seen. And sorry, Talking Heads was one of the greatest live experiences I ever had in my life. I always said that show was one of the best things I'd ever seen happen. It was just took my breath away. I just remember standing on my seat the whole show and watching those guys just kill it and dancing and grooving and just being in the spirit. So as happens in my life, getting involved with all the music festivals and everything and meeting all these crazy friends, I hooked up with this contingent in Northern California through my friend Martin Shore. And he brought some of his people down to introduce them to Bonnaroo. And one of his friends was Jerry Harrison from the Talking Heads. And Jerry and I and Martin were all in this RV hanging out. I think it was 2011, I believe. And we became fast friends. We hung out, went to the shows, and Jerry's like all of us. He's a music lover. He's been in the music business for years, and he's just as down to earth and normal as you probably wouldn't expect from a member of the Talking Heads, because they were quite the quirky act back in the day. A bunch of art school guys and girls, and in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, legendary. Yes, it was not Martin Short. Martin Shore. Okay. 2 different people. I knew Martin Short too, but that a completely different story. Martin Shore is producer and director of a great series called Take Me to the River. And Jerry's actually worked on that also. And we're going to get into that. And Jerry's an entrepreneur. He's involved in a couple really cool different businesses. And I'd like you all to say hi to my friend, Jerry Harrison. Hello, Jerry.
Hey, Jeff, and to everybody else. Hi to you as well.
How's it going?
It's going great. Thank you. A beautiful day here.
Yes, you're still in Marin, right?
Still in Marin, which I have to say I feel very, very fortunate that if you have to pick a place to be sheltering in place, this is a great one. So
yes, it's absolutely beautiful up there.
Yep, and we live near Parkland here in Marin. So wonderful, still can go on great walks and stuff like that. I've been talking to some friends where there's plenty of things to worry about in the world, but I still feel like less stressful because I don't get in cars all the time. And you just kind of feel like, I was talking to a friend of mine who I go sailing with, and he goes, yeah, there's kids swimming in the canal and on the street in bicycles. I said, it's almost like the 50s, you know, like you run into people walking your dog and things like that. So I know it's been stressful to everybody else, but I sort of would like to point this out to the world. It's like, also think about how, you know, you maybe have the time to think about things, organize things, do things that you've been putting off for years, and here's your chance.
Yeah, well, we're a lot more relaxed.
Yeah.
And we don't have anything on the agenda.
Right.
But your agenda, you've been in the studio a lot throughout your life after the band, and you hadn't toured in decades, and you just had on your calendar locked in the first touring dates in what, 20 years?
Well, yeah. Of being, you know, I've sat in with various people here and there, but not doing a one-off. The last tour I did was when Chris and Tina and I did the album No Talking, Just Heads, which was in the mid-90s. So
96, yeah. So that was a long time ago.
More than 20 years ago. I've got to say I was sort of scared and nervous, but in a good way.
You mean in 90? You mean this year you were scared and nervous?
Yeah. Getting ready for this is like, ooh, you know, and we had
how far had you gotten into the preparation?
Well, we had a rehearsal in Nashville. Turquoise was playing at the Exit Inn, and Adrian Belew lives in Nashville. So I flew out there in the end of November, I think it was, and we had a rehearsal, and it was sort of great. It was at Studio Instrument Rentals, and we took a break, and there were all these people in the hallway listening at the door, going, "What the hell is going on in there?" And it was like, I think we're on to something. And you know, it was well, the guys in Turquoise, you know, they were a really great band. I had produced them, so we knew each other. And you know, you were mentioning the Remain in Light tour. That was the tour that Adrian Belew was on. So the first time we had a big band had Adrian, and it had some other people, Dolette McDonald and Busta Jones. And there was the feeling of that tour was a little different than what became Stop Making Sense. There's a show, there's a YouTube video from Rome 1980 that captures this, and that was sort of my goal. And then Adrian joined me. That he goes, his audience, people come up to them, and they say, when I watch that show, it's the most joyful show I think I've ever seen. So I recommend it to all of your viewers to check out this video, because if you've seen Stop Making Sense, you're going to see, you might say, version 1.0 there.
That's the April 1980 Italy, right?
That's right. In fact, I believe that it was the day after that John Lennon was assassinated.
Oh, well, that would be December, right?
Yeah, because I remember that I think it was on that tour that we were in Nice, and then we had to drive to Rome because the air traffic control, one of the countries had gone on strike, as they do in France and Italy, and suddenly there's nobody that works the border and there's nobody that works the airports, and you've got to scramble. But it was we played the sports arena in Rome that had been built by Nervi, who was a structural engineer architect who I admired, and it was just a magical evening.
Oh yeah, well, Italy is a magical place, and they've really been through the ringer. Everybody's been through the ringer right now. But Turquoise, incredible band. I mean, their live act is so hot. They're just like a party band, dance party. I've seen them many times, and I immediately, when I heard it, I was like, that is the party set of the summer. That you're just going to go in and dance your ass off.
Well, you know, and I was so excited about it because we were playing mainly festivals. We were playing Red Rocks and a couple of other single dates that I was equally excited about, because Red Rocks, of course, is so special. But I felt that this was a band that, you could hear it in the afternoon and you could hear it late at night. It didn't matter what time of day. We didn't need lights. It was like, as long as you heard the music, you were going to be in a good mood. And you were going to see a lot of people on stage moving around and jumping around and dancing, and you would be compelled to join us.
Yeah, but Turquoise seems to wear a lot of color. Like, they're very colorful acts.
They have this idea that each person in the band has a color, but I think that they were going to have a special outfits for this tour.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And Adrian, when was the last time you played with Adrian?
Oh Lord, I think the last time I played with him was when he played on Walk on Water, my third solo record. Wow. Adrian and I have a lot of connections. I was the one who brought him into playing Talking Heads, and then he was living in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, and I grew up in Milwaukee, and I had gone back, and I would split my time between New York and Milwaukee because my father died suddenly, and my mother had bone cancer, and I would go back to take care of her. And then I found recording studios in Milwaukee, and then down in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and which is sort of a summer resort for Chicago. And
that's up where Alpine Valley Music Theater.
Exactly. So right next to Alpine Valley is what had been the Playboy Resort. And Playboy Records had built a recording studio there that a diamond dealer from Chicago had bought. And I would go down there and work there because at that point it was actually the world's biggest SSL. And it had the most equipment of any studio in the world. And it was in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. And nobody knew about it, and I could get it for a great price. So I'd go and work there, and Adrian moved up there, and actually for a while was managed by this diamond dealer who sort of self-destructed. So Adrian was living there, and I'd see him when I was working down there, so we'd be hanging out because I was doing, I worked on the Bodines there, I worked on Walk on Water there, I worked on a band called Semi-Twang there. I know that because I've introduced Dave Jordan, the engineer for Remain in Light, to that he came back and he mixed Chili Peppers' Mother's Milk at that studio. A lot of actually pretty cutting edge stuff came out of that place.
That was your Wisconsin local boy hot tip.
Yeah, and there was a studio in Milwaukee that I liked a lot too. And I ended up producing the Bodines and the Violent Femmes. There was a real, well,
they're both from that area, right?
Mini epicenter of music for a little period of time. And these things happen where a city suddenly just the musicians sort of hit the zeitgeist, and it doesn't usually last when it's a town that's not like New York or an LA or a bigger town. It's like when the musicians become large enough to go on tour all around the world, then it sort of shrinks back to being a normal scene. But there was a moment where Milwaukee actually was putting out an awful lot of great talent.
Yeah, it's a very interesting place. I have a lot of friends from there, and they all send their love. They're like, tell Jerry we said hi. We're all Wisconsin fans.
Oh, that's great. Well, I still love it. And I was looking forward to playing Summerfest, this summer.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest musical festivals in the United States, right? Summerfest.
It's the biggest in the world every year.
And with 6 weeks or something like that, or
no, it's 10 days, and it's more than 1 million people attend every year.
Wow!
And it's something like 5 or 6 stages going from noon till 1 o'clock in the morning for 10 days. So that's how many bands are going to play.
Was that your first experience to a concert kind of experience?
No, because it didn't exist when I was growing up.
What was your first live music experience?
It's either the Love and Spoonful at the Eagles Club Ballroom, or it was the Animals and Herman's Hermits at the Arena. And then there was James Brown at the Milwaukee Auditorium. I missed the Yardbirds playing at a club in Racine, Wisconsin, because I had to go to a wedding with my parents, which I was furious about.
Ouch.
Yep. And I now know that there were a lot of great things I missed at that time. But I am of the very fortunate age to have. I then when I went to college in Cambridge, I was going to the early Boston Tea Party, the first one, and saw, Cream came through the Cream on their first tour. I saw Led Zeppelin's first tour when they were opening for Iron Butterfly. I saw, the Who do the Happy Jack tour. I feel part of, I don't reach quite back to the swinging London scene that you see in the movie Blow Up. If I could, I were a little bit older, I might have been able to make that. But I sure got to see a lot of really important periods of time. The folk movement was still important, and the Club 47 in Cambridge was where Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, and Jeff Buckley's father, Tim Buckley, and I saw Muddy Waters there. Just a little teeny club, and so.
What was the act that made you want to be a musician?
My father had been a musician and to pay for himself to go through college, and I didn't think I was going to be a musician because I just basically didn't think I was good enough. I was in high school bands, and interestingly, my high school band, actually, a bunch of us went on to some real notoriety. The guitar player in the band played guitar for Leonard Cohen for 25 years.
Wow.
The bass player played bass for Johnny Winter for 12 years and played with Mick Taylor and various other people. The singer became the president of the American Institute of Architects. And the drummer fought in Vietnam in the Marine Corps and now works in hospitals as a physician's assistant in Seattle. So for a little suburb in Milwaukee. Also, in that same high school were the Zucker brothers, who also played in bands, who made Airplane and Ghosts and
Naked Gun
and all of those. They were good friends of mine. We've had shows to raise money for the arts and music department at our high school that all of us have gone back to, and it's and I had this is unbelievable, but my 50th high school reunion a while ago, and the band was these people I was talking about, and I think it's so unique to think that, you sort of see something like Something Wild where the high school band gets up and plays one song, usually the equipment of the band they hired, but in this case, the band was the same people that they saw in high school, but playing, and we were great. It was a really good show. And everybody who came, so pretty unique. So anyway, so how I thought about being a musician. I went to college. I sold all of them musical instruments. I thought, okay, I'm going to be serious now. I'm going to have to wear a tie and a jacket to have dinner. And Ernie Brooks, who became my roommate and then was in the Modern Lovers with me, lived downstairs. And he started a band, and I'd go listen to them. I went, well, I'm just as good as these guys, if not better. And so I joined that band, but it was not until I met Jonathan Richman, and then I put him in a film I was making, that I realized it didn't matter if I had not, started playing the piano when I was 3 and gone to the academy. I didn't need that. It was just, the Modern Lovers were playing music that nobody else in the world was, and I was a part of making that sound happen. And that's when I realized that I could be a professional musician. And to me, at that period of time, music defined our culture in a way that I don't think it does in the same way anymore.
And we're talking early 70s here, right?
Late 60s.
Late 60s.
Yeah, and then early 70s. And it was, it was like Bob Dylan and the Beatles were more important than John Kennedy. I mean, it was like they were part and parcel of the anti-war movement. They were all interlinked. And so to be part of what determined the culture, to me, seemed to be what I really was aspiring to. And so when I met Jonathan, I felt, here's my chance to actually do that. And then when the Modern Lovers sort of imploded, I had to wait quite a few years, but then but because of being in the Modern Lovers, the people in the Chris and Tina and David knew that I existed, and then we connected, and I joined Talking Heads.
And that was 77 in the Heads?
Exactly. January. I met them in 76, and I joined in January of 77.
And when did the first record come out? Was that just around then?
No, it came out the fall of 77. So I played on the entire album. We did a tour opening for the Ramones in Europe and Great Britain in May, June of 77, then came back and finished the record, and it came out in, I don't know, September or something like that.
What was the songwriting process like in the Heads?
Well, we tried to do things differently for every album, like a different recording process, but sometimes also a different writing process. When I joined the band, all the songs were written, and even the second album, almost all the songs had been previously written. The only time I worked with David on and co-wrote some of the songs on Fear of Music, songs like Memories Can't Wait, Life During Wartime, Mind, Heaven. When we got to Remain in Light, we decided that we would write the songs while we were in the studio together. So that became the music of the record was written by all of us, including Eno at that time. And then the lyrics really were still David's department. Chris, whose birthday I must note is today as well,
yes,
co-wrote a few songs on the first record, like Warning Sign, and I think one other. And then Chris and Tina both worked on Psycho Killer as well, our co-writers.
And it's some of the most brilliant, endearing, enduring music that I think has even grown exponentially in fandom. It
is remarkable. We also had, there was a point where we were far more, I don't know, we'll say restrictive about films or where people could use Talking Heads music. But I think that, there was a moment where it was almost like you were selling out if you released it anywhere other than on your own albums. But that sort of has gone away. And of course, also making money from recording music has also somewhat gone away. So if you can make money from it being in a TV show or a movie, great.
Yeah.
But it's helped keep us current. I also think that, I went back and I was always the one who would do the remastering if we had a greatest hits album. And Eric E.T. Thorngren and I remixed all the Talking Heads records in surround sound back in, I think, 2008, 9 or something like that. I'm not exactly sure of the years right now. And for DVD audio, might be a little later, which if none of you have ever heard is really remarkable. Sometimes some really good car stereos will play this and you can hear, things like a song like The Great Curve from Remain in Light, where you have these 3 independent background parts. But when they're coming at you from different angles, it's much more intense than just in the stereo field. It's a little Charles Ives-like, and I recommend it as a listening experience. But I think that also, those plus some of the great films like Wall Street or that have used Talking Heads music have kept it fresh. And then, of course, as you mentioned, other bands being influenced by us were they go to a radio station and they'll play our song, and it's been great. And it is sort of unique that it doesn't feel absolutely defined by one period. It feels fresh today.
How does it feel to have hundreds of millions of dollars waved under your nose and not be able to jump at the opportunity to snatch it?
Regretful. Having been through the Modern Lovers breaking up, I know that when people are artistically working together, that there's probably a limited lifespan to it. And so I always expected that a time would come. I think that it's a shame that a lot of people who would love to get to see us play, and that we're all still have toured and still can do it, that they would have really enjoyed it. And I feel really fortunate that we did get together and play when we were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because my wife had never seen us play, and certainly my kids didn't know anything about it. And so getting to see us perform together, which we actually took the time. We went and rehearsed for 3 days before straight to get ready for that, playing 3 songs. And
how was the energy between you in the practice room for 3 days? Because you guys hadn't been together before that for a decade at least.
It actually was really, really good. And actually Gina Gershon was getting ready to make a movie where she played a punk rock star, and she was rehearsing in the next room, and she and her band would come over and be our audience. And it was fun. I mean, I would have loved it to have kept playing. I think that we, I think also the opportunities to design a show for stadiums would have been a unique and wonderful challenge that I know that David would have enjoyed. But it's, there does come a point where, in a way, you don't want to spoil the memory by not doing something as well as you did it when you were younger, had more energy. So there doesn't come a point where you might say maybe it's best when it's a part of history. It's been captured in film, and so
people can relive it. But ultimately, you don't want to get together and do something just for money. I saw the interview in Rolling Stone when you brought up the Police's reunion, and that was like highway robbery. When they drove away from Bonnaroo, I really felt like they had just robbed the bank, and we're just like, okay, here we go.
Yeah,
it's just so sad, But and you're right, the memory's better where it is.
The songs are so strong, and David, I mean, all of us still play music and still could do a good job. And I think that although we would never have the energy we had when we were in our late 20s, but we in early 30s, but we I think it would still be a great show, but
Well, now you have bands like Genesis, which are trying to put together. Now you're not putting together any tour, but there was talk of them finally getting Gabriel to come aboard and everybody go out. But Phil can't play drums anymore, and they're all so old that it's going to be hard for them to tour and play.
Well, that's something that was one of the reasons that I thought this show with Turquoise and Adrian would be so good, because Turquoise is still in the prime of their playing. They do it all the time. And then adding the magic of Adrian's playing and his singing and the sort of quirky uniqueness of the way I play, I thought it was going to be that we would do a really good job of capturing that energy and, but creating a really good time for everyone who came to the show.
Well, there's nobody that doesn't like Remain in Light as a record. I mean, it's an amazing record. The world beat, the amount of musicians on that tour, and in that, when I could have believed how many people toured. Was that 10 on stage or 8?
9? Let me think. Well, when it was a little different with Adrian, we only had one singer with Adrian, but we had a second bass player. So there were the 4 of us, and then Bernie, Steve, 2 singers, Alex, 5. Yeah, 9 of us.
And it was absolutely, and the band would just build throughout the show, like one person, 2, 3. Yeah. I was, as a kid, I was 20 years old when I saw that, and I was just like mind-boggling. You're just like, wow, how innovative! The tape deck at the beginning, the whole 9 yards.
I think that one of the reasons that Stop Making Sense has such lasting value is that the visuals of our show had nothing that was about technology that had just come out. We had rear screen slide projections, which had been around for decades. We had handheld lights. We had certain other kinds of lighting effects, but they were none of them were kind of, we didn't have Vero lights were just coming out then. We didn't have like something that you could almost date the show by the way the lights were used.
Right.
And a lot of people's shows, when you go see their concert films, you go, oh, I remember, well, there is a little bit of an element. I remember when people had shoulder pads, Things like, there are certain things that give things away and give it a date. But I think that in general, Stop Making Sense has a more timeless quality, and that adds to its sort of longevity.
Yeah, I mean, amazing record, amazing band, amazing career. But you know what? People do move on, and you've had an amazing career. Looking at the amount of music you've produced and been involved with in your life, you know, you've done almost every live record, I believe, right, for the band live.
All the important ones.
All the and then you got involved with the hippie bands. So that's been more of a recent thing, right? The String Cheeses.
Yep, that's true. And they're first of all great fun to go and sit in with and play with, and you know, and also I moved to Mill Valley, so I know Bob Weir and Phil Lesh now, and you know, it's funny, the New Yorker, and it took me a while to actually go, and I never was like a person who just felt totally comfortable jamming without any preparations. But eventually, you know, I remember when I first met Bob, goes like, when I first met you, you just said you didn't like to jam, but I've ended up playing with him a lot of times now. And it's great. And there's a wonderful club here, Sweetwater, which I'm a big supporter of, and sat in with people there. But I've been very fortunate if Talking Heads had continued, I don't think I would have ever been able to have spent as much time doing music production. I had started that while I was in Talking Heads. I did the Violent Femmes while I was in Talking Heads, and I did Fine Young Cannibals when I was in Talking Heads, and a band called It's Immaterial that I had a hit in England called Driving Away from Home. But there was something great about being a producer full time, because you got your groove on, so to speak. You had the engineers you like to work with, the studios you like to work with, and you got the process so that you could handle the different things that different musicians and different bands threw at you, because it's a whole mixture of being of finding a way to bring out the best performances of a talented group of people. Sometimes stepping in and saying, you need to write another part to this song. Sometimes even helping to write that part. Sometimes holding off the record company from getting involved too early and wrecking the process by their demand for a commerciality. I mean, I was always given, and I think the band, and unfortunately it was the decade that you could still do this, is I could take bands that were a little bit on the outside, but make a song that would be played on the radio and give them, I was never part of the pure pop type of music. I was doing, you know, I worked, you know, briefly. I did a song with No Doubt that was for a movie, but they had put on Return to Saturn and on their Greatest Hits album. I did a song with the Foo Fighters for a movie, Walking After You. I did blues albums with Kenny Wayne Shepherds, and you know, I learned from being around Double Trouble and Kenny, that's when I had been in blues bands in high school, how not only mediocre was I and were we, because we didn't have this deeper understanding of what a shuffle beat was and what the groove was. But then I also went back and listened to some of the English blues that I thought was great in the late 60s and 70s, and I had looked at it in a new light, having this new knowledge of where they had gotten their influences and listening to their influences a little more carefully, and realizing that they had fallen into some of the traps that my high school bands had as well. So, you know, the great thing about being a producer is you can make music that you wouldn't make or couldn't make yourself. I did one of the last projects I did is a band called Le Butcherettes with Terry Genderbender, and she is just an amazing talent. You know, she just has such energy and intelligence and passion, and it was just a really fun making that record. But there were certain things that me being a little more old-fashioned or something like that, I brought a certain, I don't know, discipline to her making a record. I think that she probably took more time making this record than any of the other records she'd ever made, and I think that it took her to a new place. And I always tried to set up a recording schedule and would try to find inexpensive studios so that the bands I were working with could have the time to experiment and not feel so rushed because of basically they were running out of money.
Right.
And I mean, I remember when we were doing Throwing Copper and we were discussing different studios, and I said, I'll go to a number of studios, but everybody has to be able to drive their car there, because I don't want you guys in a rented car and someone gets pissed off and they take the car and someone else gets resentful. I want you to be able to say, I got to get the hell out of here. And I'm getting in my car and I'm going I've got to cool myself down by driving someplace. We made that in the same studio where Nirvana made In Utero, outside of Minneapolis in Cannon Falls. And it's interesting, I can actually hear some of the same room sound on Throwing Copper as in Utero.
Both great records.
Yeah. Yeah, and we mixed that record down in Lake Geneva at Royal, what we began talking about.
So talk about trying to deal with the legacy of a band that doesn't want to be a band. And I know you lit it up this year with grabbing the official Instagram of the Talking Heads, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, they're going to tour!" Because I guess Rage the Machine had done it 2 weeks before, right?
Well, that was not trying to. That was something that my managers did, but it was really so that people would know that all of these other fake sites weren't real, and we, because we're not as coordinated and don't spend enough time working together, really our website is run by some people in that just sort of did it in the Netherlands, and we like them, and it was but it's sort of stupid that we don't have more control over that, but it's a little balkanized. And
Yeah.
I also sort of started doing reissues of T-shirts of Talking Heads, which I spent a lot of time and found, made sure that David and Chris and Tito were happy with the designs that we were recreating and happy with, the T-shirts themselves, that they were good cotton.
Right.
And even I remember David didn't like one T-shirt because it was made in Pakistan and he thought it was made by slave labor or something like that. And so, it was like everything in Talking Heads. It ended up being for normal bands is like, what's the price? Okay, I'll take that one. It was more like a 3-week discussion for every movement forward. But they're nice T-shirts.
And you could see how hard it would be if you were trying to do anything besides a T-shirt.
Yeah, I think that the manager who was Talking Heads manager, Gary Kurfers, passed away about a decade ago. And I think had he remained alive, it would have been a little easier to maybe put something together. David, when he started the process of making the movie True Stories, he began to have his own office. And I think he also got to like the fact that he didn't have people that could say no and would say no. And so he, it's not that he doesn't collaborate with people all the time and do really, he continues to do really fascinating projects, but they're not the same as the give and take between the members of the Talking Heads. I mean, when I look at people who become famous, you often see that the ones that seem to, you might say, have their head screwed on right, always retain some friend from earlier in their life, or some friends that know when you did something really embarrassing. You have, your parents.
They know your skeletons.
They know your skeleton. They know the time you pooped in your pants, or the time that you had that ridiculous haircut, or you were dating that girl that nobody could believe you would go out with, or whatever it was. And when people that still have those friendships, they do it as a way to keep themselves centered on where they came from and who they are. And I think that there are people who have become stars who surround themselves with their new friends. But those friends are usually transactional,
Right.
and there's a real danger in that. And that everything is
Well,
yeah.
they get on the gravy train and ride it while it's weren't there for the hard days.
It's that or they're just they're a famous person, and you guys could help we could help each other's careers, or
Right.
there is that element that when you're out with other musicians who know what the rigors of the road are, who know what it's like to be polite but sometimes want to try and somehow escape being surrounded by fans, or just trying to negotiate the same kinds of issues, that also brings a sense of camaraderie and shared experience that is similar to like going to school together or something like
Right.
that. You have that, but it's great if you have the balance of both in your world.
Yeah, but let's face it, the rock and roll history is loaded with tons of childhood friends that couldn't get it on after a certain amount of time. It's just like,
yeah.
I'm dialing out of this. And I think everybody understands that. And you know what? David has done an amazing job with the legacy of the Talking Heads music. I've seen him live many times. I saw the Broadway. You haven't seen Broadway yet, but you've seen the show?
I saw the show when it was in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And so I know basically what it is. I'm looking forward to seeing it on Broadway. I was in New York in the early days that it was, but I know how, asking for tickets when it used to be the biggest pain in the ass was playing New York. And I used to end up spending usually like a couple of $1,000 subsidizing friends coming to my show.
Right.
Because too many people asked for free tickets. And
of course.
And so I just decided I knew what the show was about. I wasn't going to put David in that position. And then, well, now
who knows?
Now we're in the who knows when we're going to really get to feel comfortable seeing live music again. It's I can sort of much more deal with not going to restaurants and the idea of not going out to see music.
Yeah, are you done doing dishes? Has it got to you yet?
Well, my wife is such a good cook. I feel quite an obligation to do the dishes. So, no, I'm not sick of it because we've been eating really well.
But it is. This is a record for home cooked meals here at our house.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. We eat out all the time, and we've gotten takeout, I think, 3 times in the last 50 days.
Yeah. Well, when you start thinking about the money to cook and how cheap it is compared to what you're paying for, I mean, and it's still coming to your house, you got to clean up the dishes anyway. What's the difference,
Yeah.
I do miss going out. I mean, I miss concerts. There's been articles in Rolling Stone about what the concerts and what's going to be the new paradigm. What is your vision? Do you have like something? Do you have an idea of what it's going to be like? Because we're all have these fantasies in our mind. Space. I saw these things that people have spacesuits now for people to wear at concerts, like a helmet.
Sounds pretty hot.
Yeah, it's hot enough.
not to mention like what to do to the sound. I think that a vaccine sounds like the best idea. And
but are you lining up to get the first shot? I'm not.
No,
I'll let somebody else get that and see how it goes. Who knows? They're probably planting microchips in our head. You have a huge love from the band Fish and all the Fish heads. And I remember in 2011 when we were in the RV hanging out and I played Cities for You. You hadn't heard it yet.
Right.
I played Cities for You and you were like, whoa, they really slowed it down.
Yeah, I played Roadrunner with Trey one time when he was on a solo tour. And that was a lot of fun.
So he's a huge Modern Lovers fan.
He is, I know. And I actually know this engineer, Dan Alexander, from up in Burlington, who worked with them in the earliest days, who works with Ernie Brooks even till this day. So, yeah, anyway, what the future of live shows are. I mean, my favorite live shows are really going to clubs and going to more intimate, but usually then pretty packed in audiences. You think of a place like the Greek Theater, which in Berkeley, which is it's like cement steps, and it's nestled into the hills, Berkeley Hills, and it's a beautiful place. We played there on the Stop Making Sense tour, and you could imagine a great art piece with everyone being 6 feet apart. But, but it's not going to. I don't know. It does. It's certain the economics don't make any sense. It's not.
No, not at all. And also the vibe doesn't make any sense. How do you have a vibe with everybody separated? It's just different. I feel like we were all lucky to go to places like Bonnaroo and Outside Lands, and you and I were at Burning Man this year. Was that that was your second time at Burning Man, or
my second time? Yeah, I sandblasted my loft back in New York and damaged my lungs, and I actually was throwing up from coughing for a year back in the 70s, and so the amount of dust at Burning Man was a great disincentive. And then I just finally, like, these friends of mine, of Carol of mine, John and Carrie, who are part of
Disorient
Camp.
Yes.
They just were bugging us to go for years, and it was finally like, I'm not going to die having not gone. I'll just go. Whatever happens, happens. I'll try to prepare. So yes, I went 2 years in a row. Last year I was there for 10 days, so a long time. And so I really know it now. I understand it. I feel it. I don't know. We'll have to see. Again,
how do you describe it? How do you describe Burning Man?
Well, it's a little bit like that description of sailing. Like a description of sailing is like standing in a cold shower, ripping up $100 bills. And Burning Man is like, standing in a sandblaster, really tired but really happy, and just feeling, just a connection, but also that you're out in the wild and you've got to take care of each other. You're in a really harsh and potentially dangerous environment, and if people don't cooperate and if people don't help each other, you could get really hurt. Someone else could get really hurt. You've got to look out for your fellow man. And then there's just this sense of freedom for people to express themselves. And, it's quite wonderful. Although I go in there and I go, I don't think I would have wanted to be bringing my teenage daughters to this. I'm not sure that I'm having them wandering around by themselves, but just because I'm, there's 80,000 people here, and I'm not sure I trust every one of them.
No, not at all.
But it's like a music festival in some ways. A dry and dusty Bonnaroo was about as close to Burning Man as anywhere else I was. It was it's a lot of people packed together, a lot of music. Sometimes I found the electronica that was being played at excruciating volumes near to the Disorient camp pretty, like there was no way to escape it. Like you could go into your tent or your RV to get away from the heat or to go get away from the stand, but there was earplugs didn't do the trick. It was like getting away from, you might say, somebody else's choice in music. That was, I found.
Are you a big EDM fan?
I was a fan of the things that were the forerunners of EDM. Things like, Kraftwerk and Kahn and Tangerine Dream and so I do like it. I basically, because I got tinnitus, I never have been able to really be in the moment in the EDM scene because it's so loud that even with earplugs, it was making my ears ring.
It's annoying.
And so I never could quite have the sort of totality of experience that I know that others were having. And I kind of get it from my concert experiences and stuff from earlier and knowing that music. I don't find it music that I necessarily would want to put on at home.
Right.
I know there are people that do that, but I've been over at their houses, and it's like, I don't know, this, I'd rather have songs, frankly, than.
Yes. Why don't we talk about, you're involved in a couple other businesses.
Yeah.
And one, I have a boxer, a dog.
Yeah.
And we've taken her up in the local trails, and she was about 1.5 years, and she got munched on the head by a rattlesnake.
Wow.
And we ended up spending probably $7,000. I mean, we had doggy insurance, or else she would have been a dead dog. Yeah. But it was not fun. And I know one of the things you're dealing with is a snake bite event.
That's right. And it's not anti-venom, it's an antidote. And we've taken a totally different approach. Basically, anti-venom was invented in the 1880s. And the way they make it is they inject snake venom into horses or sheep. And then the horses survive and make antibodies, and they try and take the antibodies out of the horse blood and give it, and then purify it as much as they can, and then give it to you. People have, there are quite a few dangers to antivenom. The first one is antivenom from the wrong snake won't do any good for this other snake. So if you don't know what snake bit you, you might be out of luck. I mean, and there is such a change. There's like a sort of a, I guess you'd call it speciation. It's like rattlesnakes. There's something like 10 different species between the Mexican border and Canada on the Pacific coast. So if the antivenom was made from one in Oregon, it might not really work in Southern California. The other thing is that people go into anaphylactic shock, and you need to get it fairly soon. So, and also it has to be, have to get it through an IV, and you really need to be hospitalized. You have to be in professional care. What we have come up with, which is something that works on nearly every snake in the world. And it basically absolutely gets you to the hospital, and sometimes is all you need. And we actually have done tests where a pig got, there's a rattlesnake near you called the Mojave Green, which is super poisonous. Rattlesnakes their venom can go from being hemotoxic, which means it attacks your blood and basically causes you to bleed to death. It's sort of like it really comes from digestive enzymes. It's the snake beginning to digest you, and to neurotoxins, which basically stop the nerves from firing properly, and so therefore your lungs stop working and you suffocate. And so we did these tests with both the Pacific taipan and the Mojave Green, where the pigs got antivenom, but it was a little late, and they're basically lying moribund on the floor, and we give them like a single IV injection of our medicine, and in 15 minutes to a half an hour, they're standing up. In an hour, they're rooting around, and 2 hours later, they're eating. It's like they've been brought back from the dead.
How did you find this company? How did this come to your attention?
I was having this party, like a beautiful time of the year, just like this. We were having like a garden party, and I had met a bunch of doctors and neuroscientists, and so one of them, who I'd been hiking with, brought a friend, and I was we were in our kitchen, and I just said to myself, I said, there's a lot of smart people here. So I said, is there anyone who has like a really important idea they haven't done anything with? And this guy said, I have this idea about snakes. And he was an emergency room doctor who would be the doctors on field, like dinosaur digs in Mongolia or in Patagonia. Oh. And so he'd have to figure what he could carry in one backpack to take care of everything from punctured lungs to broken limbs to snake bites to spider bites to pneumonia and like what medicine could he carry on his back. And so he had an idea that worked on neurotoxic snake bites. That was our first thing, but that was more limited. And then he thought about it long enough, and we came upon a drug that had been tested by Eli Lilly for a completely different for sepsis, and was off patent. And they were generously enough shared some of their studies with them and information. And so we have been going through the process of the FDA of getting this to become a drug that you can prescribe. I think eventually it's so safe, really, that I think eventually you might, in my mind, you'll be able to get it like you can get an EpiPen. We have an oral version that you could carry with you in your pocket, and you could have given it to your dog, and it would have immediately started counteracting the effect of the rattlesnake bite on the way to the hospital, so that when you got to the hospital, maybe you didn't even need to spend any money, or there was only one vial of antivenom instead of 20. Antivenom, by the way, is in the United States, the cost of being bit by a snake, the pharmaceutical cost at the hospital is $60,000 to $100,000.
Whoa.
Per patient.
Whoa. No wonder why my dog costs so much.
Well, the dog is cheaper. And for people, you have these things in places like poor countries like India, where even though the cost is much less than it is here, it's sometimes a lifetime of savings of a family. And sometimes it's so late in the game that, yes, you've saved the life of the child, but the child is, blind, or,
right.
Really,
it has an after effect.
And cannot, its arms, its hand is twisted up. I mean, photos are gut wrenching. There's a film called Minutes to Die that we helped get funded. And that really, anyone who's interested in learning about snake bites, I recommend. You can see most of it, you can find on YouTube. And it really shows what the effects of this are. And, mosquitoes kill the most people. People kill the next most people. And snakes are third.
Wow.
Snakes kill more than 100,000 people a year and maim between 500,000 and 1 million people. And that's just counting the people that get counted. An awful lot of people never make it to care or make it to the hospital. So we don't really know the total effect. But like you just talking about your dog, when I bring this up to people, it's like this, the thing of 6 degrees of separation. It's usually 1 degree of separation between, oh, my sister got bit, or my dog got bit, or I have a friend who, it's much more prevalent than at first glance you would think here in the United States. And, other parts of the world, of course, it's.
Well, maybe you could get these guys working on the COVID.
Yeah, well, I have to say that we have ideas about that, and they might pay off.
Good. I really like it. Jerry, I love you, man. You're an original. You're a legend. You've created a musical catalog that is endearing and close to all of our hearts.
Well, thank you very much. And Jeff, it's been wonderful getting to know you. I'm so glad that I took that trip with Martin and we connected for the first time. I know that when we got to Burning Man, we said, I can't imagine Martin here, but it's great that you're here.
And I told him that, and he gets a little offended. So now I think.
Well, now he's got, when it comes back, he'll have the challenge of braving.
We've thrown the gauntlet down.
Of finding a way to go to Black Rock.
Absolutely beautiful. Thanks, Jerry. I love the carol, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
You bet. Okay.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you too. Take care. Jerry Harrison, ladies and gentlemen. The hits keep on coming here at 420 Live with Jeff Kravitz. I really appreciate all of you. The first week here at Osiris has been absolutely amazing, and we have many, many more fun things coming. Next week's schedule will be up on Sunday night, I'm hoping. I'm lining everything up, stringing it together. It's like making a cake. My daughter's been making sourdough. I saw what she went through. That's kind of like the same work I'm putting into the show. Hours and hours and weeks, and a little bit more starter, a little bit more. Got to feed the starter. I'm feeding the starter. Thanks, everybody. My friends at Asher's Chocolates, our friends at Solo Pipe. All you people, take care of each other. I love you. Here's the hug. Boom. Peace, love, happiness. Have a great weekend. Happy birthday to me. Ha ha. See y'all.